All right, let's dive in. We're tackling something a lot of you have asked about, how to sound really fluent in English. And we've got this 7-day fluency guide. 7 days, huh?
It's a bold claim, isn't it?
Yeah, a little skeptical, gotta be honest.
But, one thing that's interesting is it doesn't just focus on the grammar.
Right.
It really emphasizes actually using the language, especially with native speakers.
Okay, see, that's interesting to me because I remember back in the day, high school, verb conjugations, all that, didn't exactly make me a smooth talker. So are we saying ditch the textbooks and just jump into conversations? Is that the secret sauce here?
Well, think about how you learned your first language. It wasn't memorizing rules, was it?
No, definitely not.
Constant exposure, interaction, and that's kind of what this guide taps into.
So more like osmosis. You absorb it by being around it.
Exactly. Less about the grammar rules, more about just jumping in and practicing. Like, you can study swimming techniques all day, but until you're in the water.
Right. You got to get in the pool. Okay, I'm starting to see the logic here. But the guide also talks about idioms, and I always get tripped up on those. I worry about sounding, awkward. Are they really that important?
Well, idioms are tricky, but think of them as cultural shortcuts. They add that color, that humor that makes you sound more natural.
Okay, give me an example. What's one from the guide that really highlights this?
Raining cats and dogs, for example.
Right. Classic, but never understood it literally.
Exactly. It's not literal. It's a vivid way to say it's raining heavily, and it gives you insight into, how English speakers think.
So it's more than the words themselves, it's the cultural context behind them.
Exactly. And the guide has some fun ones. Hit the sack means to go to sleep, or my dogs are barking, which means your feet are hurting.
Wait, my dogs are barking. Okay, that's one I wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah, you start using those and you sound less like you're reading from a textbook, more like you're really in the language. But remember, context is key. Pay attention to how native speakers use them.
Okay, so we've got immersion, we've got idioms. What else is in this fast track to fluency? I see the guide mentions tongue twisters. I always thought those were more party tricks than learning tools, honestly.
They are fun.
Yeah.
But they actually serve a purpose. They train your mouth muscles, improve pronunciation.
Well, like a workout for your tongue. I guess that makes sense, especially since the guide is all about interacting with native speakers.
Exactly. It compares it to an athlete training.
Ah.
The more you practice those tricky sounds, the smoother you become, building that muscle memory.
All right, stage accepted. Give me a tough one from the guide. Let's see what we've got.
Which watch did which wear? That's a classic.
Oh, man. That was going to take some practice. There's that infamous she sells seashells.
Oh, yeah, that one too. You start getting those down, you really internalize the rhythm of English.
Okay, it's more than just saying the words right. It's getting that flow, like music almost.
Exactly, like practicing your scales.
All right, I like that analogy. So we're training our mouths to make those specific sounds, get that rhythm that sounds natural. But gotta ask, what about phrasal verbs? Those always trip me up.
Ah, yeah, phrasal verbs. They can be a challenge. They're those combinations, the verbs plus prepositions or adverbs, they create whole new meanings.
Okay, I need an example. That sounds complicated.
So break down, literally a car breaks down, right? But it can also mean to lose control emotionally.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Like, I broke down in tears.
Okay, so same words, totally different meaning. That's tricky.
They're essential, though, like building blocks for sounding really natural.
I see. So again, it comes back to paying attention to how native speakers actually use these things.
Exactly. And you can start experimenting with them, see how they work in different contexts.
It's like being a chef. You got to know which spices go with which dish.
Exactly.
All right, so far we've got immersion, idioms, tongue twisters, phrasal verbs, all making me feel a bit more hopeful about this fluency thing. But we can't forget the foundation, right? Grammar.
You're absolutely right. But instead of getting lost in the weeds, the guide focuses on the things even native speakers get wrong. It's about those little nuances that make you sound truly fluent.
Oh, okay, now that I got to hear, what are native speakers messing up? Spill the beans.
Well, things like apostrophe placement.
Always a struggler.
The their confusion.
Yeah, classic.
And affect versus effect. Even seasoned English speakers mix those up.
I still do sometimes.
But the guide gives some good tips, like for there, remember that there is a contraction of they are, there shows possession, and there indicates a place.
Simple but helpful. Sometimes you just need that little reminder, But at the end of the day, isn't it all about just talking?
It is, and that's where the free talk section comes in.
Okay.
It gives you conversation starters, all kinds of topics, encourages you to just dive in and practice.
Makes sense. You got to use it or you lose it, as they say. And the guide has some interesting ones like travel, culture, technology, even some thought-provoking questions. Do you believe in astrology? Or how can we minimize bullying?
Exactly. Get you thinking, get you talking. Find those language exchange partners, online communities. Heck, even practice with yourself. The key is to make it a habit.
So it's less about being perfect, more about embracing the journey.
Exactly, you got it. And while 7 days might be a stretch, just diving into these techniques is a huge step.
That's encouraging. I'm already feeling more confident, I gotta say. But I think we need to take a pause here, come back for part 2, where we'll really dig into some more of these techniques.
Okay, welcome back to our fluency deep dive. Before the break, we were getting into idioms, tongue twisters, all that good stuff. Now I see this guide mentions slang, and I always get a little nervous about slang, like trying too hard.
Yeah, it could be tricky.
I don't want to sound like I'm out of touch or something.
Slang is definitely, it's like a code almost. You gotta know the right context. Exactly.
But what's interesting here is this guide focuses on the slang you'd hear in, say, a professional setting.
So less street slang, more office slang.
Exactly. Think of it as like leveling up your vocabulary.
Okay, I like that. Make it sound more natural in a work environment.
So you've got things like ASAP, everyone uses that, or call it a day, meaning, time to stop working, get the ball rolling to start a project.
Okay, yeah, I hear those all the time in meetings.
Right, so it's already part of your world. You just got to know how to use it actively.
But then there's some slang in here that seems more, I don't know, cultural, like diamond in the rough, throw in the towel.
Right, but those are drawing on everyday imagery. It adds personality, diamond in the rough, someone with potential. Throw in the towel means to give up.
So it's not just the words, it's the imagery behind them.
Exactly, and it can make your language more memorable, more engaging.
Okay, I'm seeing how this fits in, but how do you know when it's appropriate to use slang in a professional setting? Seems like a fine line.
It is. It's all about reading the room, Pay attention to the tone, the relationships. Is it a formal presentation or a casual brainstorm? When in doubt, better to be safe than sorry.
Okay, that makes sense. Observe, experiment, use common sense. Good advice for life in general, I guess.
Absolutely, but even with the best intentions, mistakes happen. And speaking of mistakes, the guide points out that even native English speakers struggle with some grammar concepts.
Oh, that makes me feel so much better.
It's true.
Because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who gets tripped up by this stuff.
Nope, even native speakers get confused with things like subject-verb agreement, especially in long sentences, and those homophones, there, always a classic.
Oh, tell me about it. English grammar sometimes feels like, I don't know, a minefield or something.
It can be tricky, but the guide, instead of just listing rules, it tries to explain the logic behind them.
Okay, so why are things the way they are?
Right, like with affect versus effect. Affect, usually a verb to influence. Effect, usually a noun, the result.
Okay, yeah, that actually helps to think about it that way. Less about memorizing, more about understanding.
Exactly, and with those homophones, context is key.
Right, got to figure out what the sentence is actually trying to say.
For there. Remember, there is a contraction of they are, there shows possession, and there refers to a location. And sometimes, got to be honest, you just got to memorize those irregular forms like child becomes children, not childs, or knife to knives, not knives.
It never ends, does it? Always something new to learn. But I guess that's what keeps it interesting, right?
It does. Language is always evolving, but beyond all the rules and exceptions, the key is actually using it. That's where the rubber meets the road.
And that brings us back to, I guess, conversational practice, right? That's where it all comes together.
Exactly. Put it all into action, and the guide gives tons of conversation starters, different levels. Find what interests you and go from there.
It frames it not as a test, but as a chance to connect, explore ideas. Even suggests practicing by yourself, which honestly, sometimes that's the best way to start.
It is. No pressure, just get comfortable with the sounds, the rhythm.
So it's all about the journey, not just the destination.
That's it. You've summed it up perfectly. Embrace the process.
This has been packed with insights, gotta say. Ditch the textbooks, use slang, make mistakes, enjoy the ride. But before we get to part 3, is there one, overall takeaway you want our listener to remember? And we are back for the final part of our fluency deep dive. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Idioms, slang, even those grammar things that trip us all up.
It has. And this guide really makes you rethink what fluency actually means.
Yeah, it's not just about sounding like a robot reciting rules, right?
Exactly. It's about being comfortable, expressing yourself, having fun with it.
Okay, so let's say someone's gone through this 7-day program. What happens next? What do they do to keep the momentum going? Any tips?
Well, one thing this guide really highlights is the importance of, human connection.
Right.
Finding a language partner, a tutor, someone to practice with, get feedback from.
It's like having a coach, almost.
Exactly. They can tailor things to your need, help you with those tricky sounds, and honestly, just keep you motivated.
Yeah, accountability is huge, I think. And nowadays, it's easier than ever to find people online. Right.
Oh, absolutely. So many platforms, so many resources.
And don't forget all the free stuff.
Yeah. Apps, podcasts, YouTube. The world is your oyster, as they say.
You really don't have to do this alone. But what about just immersing yourself in the language, even on your own? like movies, music, that kind of thing.
That's huge. Change the language settings on your phone, even. You'd be surprised how much that helps.
Create that little English bubble around yourself, but, sometimes it can feel overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, I get that.
Any advice for those moments when you just want to give up?
Remember, fluency, it's not a finish line you cross. It's a journey. It's ongoing.
I like that.
There will be days you feel stuck, frustrated. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate the small wins,
That's so important because it's easy to compare yourself to others and think you're not good enough.
Everyone learns differently at their own pace. And honestly, making mistakes, and that's part of it. Don't be afraid to try, experiment.
That's how we learn, right? All right, so to wrap up this fluency deep dive, ditch the textbooks, use that slang, make those mistakes, and most importantly, enjoy the ride.
And be kind to yourself along the way. Learning a language, it's a gift you're giving yourself. It opens doors, connects you with people. It's more than just words,
Couldn't have said it better myself. So on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive. Hope you feel inspired to keep learning, keep exploring.
And keep diving deep. Until next time.